students, this is Miss Dalton, and if you recognize that music, you might be a little too young for this, but that's from the movie Matrix. So this is Notes 2-5, and this is Introduction to Matrices. Today's objective, you are going to learn matrix terminology and be able to identify important parts of a matrix. So first let's start with what the definition of a matrix is. A matrix is a rectangular array of numbers that are called elements, and they are enclosed in brackets. So you're going to see something like this down here. Matrix is this example, and notice that we always are going to use a capital letter when we name the matrix. Now, the matrix is made up of what we call rows. So these are rows, and they go horizontal. And it's also made up of columns, and the columns are vertical. So keep in mind that one way that you can remember this is if you think of a house has columns, but columns are vertical because it's what holds up the house. The individual numbers that are inside this matrix, those are called elements. Okay, and so if you'll just remember this, these words that go with the matrix, then you'll be doing good. When we talk about dimensions of a matrix, that's always the rows by the columns. So in this example that I have up here, this is a 2-by-3 matrix. The 2 represents how many rows it has, and the 3 represents how many columns it has. And this is very important. You're always going to have to be able to tell what the dimensions of the matrix are in order to work the problem. So with matrices, we're going to talk about some basic operations. We're going to talk about adding matrices, subtracting matrices, and multiplying matrices. When you add matrices, one thing you're going to have to do is they must be, when you're adding matrices, they must be the same size. Okay, and that means that they have the same dimensions. Okay, so let's look at this one right here, this example that I have written down, and go ahead and add this into your notes packet. If you notice that this first matrix, it is a 2-by-2 matrix because it has 2 rows and 2 columns. And then the second matrix is a 2-by-2 matrix as well. So we can see that they do have the same size. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add these together. Okay? When we add them together, you're going to add the corresponding elements. So I'm going to go ahead and add 1 plus the -1 because those correspond together. My new matrix, in the first position, I'm going to have 1 plus -1, which gives us 0. Okay? It's an ugly looking 0. Go ahead and try and make that a little bit better. Okay, and then we're going to do the 2 plus the 5, and that gives you 7, so that's going to go here. And then we have -3 plus 0, which gives us -3, so that goes in this position. And 4 plus a -8, that gives us -4, and that's going to go in this last position. So this is my matrix after they've been added together. Alright, so subtracting matrices. In order to subtract matrices, they must be the same size, which means same dimensions, and you will need to distribute the negative through the second matrix. So let's look at an example. Let's do the same example that we did up here. But this time, let's go ahead and subtract them. So we've got, for my example, let's take that first matrix, which was 1, -3, and 2, 4. And let's subtract it with the second matrix, -1, 0, 5, -8. Now this is just like if you were subtracting other numbers. We're going to distribute through that negative. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to distribute my negative. So I'm going to make this a plus and distribute it through. So this is going to become a plus. The 0 would become negative, but 0 is going to stay the same. This becomes a negative, and then the negative 8 will become positive. And now what it becomes is just another addition problem. And so we're going to just add in the corresponding elements. So 1 plus 1 is 2. Negative 3 plus 0 is negative 3. 2 plus negative 5 is negative 3. And 4 plus 8 is 12. So this would be what those two matrices are being subtracted. The key thing here is that just remember, when you're subtracting matrices, you have to distribute through the negative, and then it just becomes an addition problem. Okay, the last operation is to multiply matrices. We have two types of multiplication. We have what's called scalar multiplication. And what I want you to think of when you see scalar multiplication, all you're going to be doing is multiplying a matrix by a constant, and it's just like distribution. Whatever number is on the outside, you are just going to distribute it through. An example of this would be having the number 3 being multiplied by a matrix on the outside. So negative 1, 2, 4, negative 5. If that 3 is on the outside, you're just going to distribute it to all of the elements that are on the inside of the matrix. So 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 4 is 12, and then 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Okay? And that would be your answer for this scalar. Now the other way that you can see it written is, and eventually tomorrow we're going to do some calculator activities, and so we'll show you how to store matrices in your calculator. And so you might see something like this, 3 times your A matrix. So whatever is your A matrix, you would multiply through by 3. Okay, the next way is multiplying matrices. And this one's a little difficult to show by hand, but the good thing is that you will have a calculator, so we can multiply matrices on your calculator very easy. But the key thing that you need to know about multiplying matrices is the first thing that you're going to do, they do not have to have the same dimensions. So you're going to write down the dimensions of each matrix. And then what has to happen in order for them to be multiplied is that the inside dimensions must match. Okay, an example of that is, I'm going to write it over here. An example of that would be if I have a 2 by 3 matrix and I want to multiply that times a 3 by 4 matrix. You know, before when we talked about addition and subtraction, the matrices had to have the same dimensions. Multiplying, the only thing that you need to look for is to make sure that those inside dimensions match. And if they do, then you can multiply it, and what ends up is your answer matrix is going to have the dimensions of those outside rows and columns. So the answer matrix is going to be a 2 by 4 matrix. Okay, and I've written that right here. The outside dimensions are going to show the dimensions of your answer. Okay, so I'm going to show you tomorrow. We're going to work on some calculator skills just with matrices, and then I will show you how to multiply a matrix by hand tomorrow. But you're going to quickly find out that you're going to want to multiply using your calculator because it is easier to do. Okay, so come to class tomorrow with your notes filled out. Please submit your WISC, do not forget that, and then tomorrow we'll talk to you about your calculator.